Hey guys, Andrew Esquivel here, back with another review, and today I'm going to be reviewing a product courtesy of a company called Ulikit. Now, they sent me over this L desk here to review, and there's a few things that I want to go over to help you decide whether or not this is the kind of desk you want to get for yourself. When looking for a desk, there's a number of qualities that come to mind that you try to look for before you make a purchase. Ease of assembly, engineering, construction quality, and aesthetic design are the ones that come to mind. And we're going to go over those. And there's actually a decent bit to go over because this desk is a little weird. Functional and decent looking, but weird. Putting the desk together only took about an hour and a half, but that time could have easily been cut down if you had used your own higher quality tools than what it came with, or had a friend help you assemble it as well. Since we're going to talk about the ease of assembly and engineering first, let's take a look at the instructions. Honestly, there's not a lot of instructions. It seems like a lot at first, and that's kind of the case with any build, but there's only a few pages, there's very few steps to each page, and this is honestly probably the easiest desk I've ever put together. It's better than something you get from IKEA. It's much easier to figure out what they're getting at. However, each part, it has a corresponding letter or number to it. And you'll see that on these little bags. And that's one of the things is it's only on the bags. And that means that every single part here is in its own individual bag. And the number or letter corresponding to that part is on the bag, not the part itself. So if you're the type to just take all the bags and stuff off first, you're gonna have a problem because there's no labeling on the parts themselves. That's one thing that kind of got me a little annoyed when looking for parts, because in some cases the corresponding letters or numbers had fallen off of the bag during shipment because, you know, a sticker requires a flat surface to really stay adhered properly, and bags can kind of, you know, they're very malleable, and sometimes the sticker falls off. So one or two parts didn't have their label on them. That being said, it wasn't exactly difficult to figure out where they went. It's not a difficult desk to put together because there's really not much to it. It's a very basic and simple desk. Moving on to the engineering aspect of the desk, there's a few things I want to point out. First off, these weird connections that they use to make sure everything is seated properly. I don't think I've ever seen a connection like this outside of something that was used in a wood construction, but the desk itself is metal, so I'm not sure why they bothered with this, because in order to get these joints put together properly, you need to use a mallet. And I personally recommend that you use a rubber mallet, not a metal one like this. You know, you're going to dent the metal. And it's not hard to dent the metal or to bend the metal, because although it's a metal construction throughout the entire thing, except for the top here, which is wood, the metal is very thin, so it's malleable. And that could be a problem if you were to build the desk and then move it, because these are all hollow tubes, and the thickness of the metal is not very thick at all. Now, I don't have something to measure the exact thickness, but just be aware that when assembling it, you should not bend it, or you should try to avoid bending it as much as possible. When it is fully assembled, make sure you put it in whatever place you want to keep it, and make sure that's where you want it to be, because if you move the desk in its entirety once it's already built, there's a chance that you may end up bending the metal. Now, granted, since it's a somewhat malleable metal, you can bend it back in place. However, there are certain parts of it that are metal that I would definitely recommend you just don't touch at all once it's put together. Those particular parts that I recommend you just don't touch at all are these cross beams right here. Now, if you go on Amazon and look at the display pictures they have, these aren't even there, and some people got upset in the reviews that they're there because they thought that this would be just open and you wouldn't need them. So some people think it has to do with the structural integrity. That's why they're there. But no, they're really not. You see, this part in particular right here is so flexible and bendy that I honestly think it's aesthetic. So it doesn't have to do with the construction quality. It's an optional piece, in my opinion. There's just no way that this, with this design, that crossbeam or that crossbeam offers any reasonable structural support. So you can just choose not to have them at all, or you can choose to have them. That's something I think should be left up to the consumer. But once they're there, just know that they're very malleable. Don't mess with them, because if you bend something enough, eventually it'll find a weak point to break on. And if there's any part in this desk that would break, it would be that part right there, because as I said, I am almost certain that that is legitimately decorative, not structural. Now, continuing to talk about the engineering of the desk, we have to talk about the ridge right here, the point where the two pieces of wood connect. And as you can see, it's not even. And it's not even all the way through. And the thing is, if we push this up, it becomes even. However, put any weight on it, it goes back down. Now, we're only talking about a millimeter in difference right here, but for some people, this is going to be really annoying, especially if you want to have a truly flat surface that you can put that's going across here. Like, for instance, I've got this laptop set up in such a manner that you can use it, and it's perfectly fine. But if you have something flat going across these two pieces right here, one side is going to be more elevated than the other. Now, depending on what you put there, determines whether or not that's really annoying or not. But just know that regardless of what you do, it seems to just have to be there. Now, I tried to rectify the situation. There is a screw that connects these two metal pieces right here. It goes directly inward, because that's where these two separate metal pieces conjoin. And if you screw it in really tight, you can get it to stay for a little bit. Now, I've tried to screw it in as much as I can with the tools that were provided, and quite frankly, there's just not enough tension in that screw to hold it securely beyond this 1 millimeter droop. Now, I've also thought about this metal piece right here that has this funky construction. You know, before, this was sitting up a little higher, because without a mallet, which is definitely not included, there's no way to get this fully down by itself. Even in the instructions, it says to bang down on it to make sure it sits as flush as possible. Now, even after banging down on it and making it as flush as possible, we still have this bump, because my mindset, or the thought process was, well, maybe this is sitting up too high. If I sit it lower, then this part will sit lower. But unfortunately, that doesn't appear to be the case. And even if it was, you know, there's an angle that it would droop at. And the fact that it's a solid 1 millimeter droop all the way through and through leads me to believe that it was an engineering design that just didn't work too great. And this is the result of that engineering. So as far as quality goes, you know, I have to take that into consideration during this review. That's definitely something that many desks that I've built have not had. And it's a shame that that is an issue that we're dealing with this desk at the price point of over $100. When building the desk, it obviously comes with a few basic tools. One of them that you're going to need that it doesn't come with, like I was saying before, is a mallet. Now, like I said, I recommend a rubber mallet so that you don't damage anything, but a metal mallet will work as well, so long as you're just banging on metal, which if we go in the instruction booklet, you see it says to use a mallet, and it is talking about banging metal on metal. So for that, I think it should be fine to use a straight metal mallet. But if for some reason you try to bang it on afterwards, after you've already put the wood top on, Don't use metal, obviously, because the wood is more malleable than the metal. Use something like a rubber mallet if you absolutely must, or use a metal mallet going downward to push it in the opposite way. But you're really just trying to get those connections to sit as flush as possible. So it does come with a few tools. It comes with a tiny screwdriver and a tiny little keyed wrench right here. And that will help you build the entire desk. You just won't be able to get these metal pieces to sit flush without the mallet. Comes with all the screws and nuts and everything that you're going to need, and they're all finely labeled, and all the major screws have at least one extra in the bag in case you happen to lose one for whatever reason. I think that's a good touch. A lot of companies don't do that, and I think that's a good idea, because losing a screw, or sometimes at the factory where they put all these things together, maybe a bag inherently just was one screw short, but having extra by default is never a bad thing. I didn't have any problems assembling the table with the provided tools, so I think it's perfectly adequate. Some people complain about, using this particular screwdriver. Oh, I stripped the thing, the head and whatnot, and I'm just like, no, if you do it right, you'll be fine. It is a pain in the butt to do it with the tools, but for the sake of doing the review, I did use what was provided. You could go and get your own tools, and I do recommend it if you have your own tools to use something better than what's provided. But, if you're in a situation where that's not a possibility, hey, at least you don't have to worry about that for assembly. So we've talked about engineering, we've talked about the structural supports and such. Now we kind of have to get to the aesthetic parts. Now, aesthetics are completely subjective, and it is your total right to agree or disagree with whether or not this is a good-looking desk. However, what you cannot argue is how this desk is particularly marketed on the page on Amazon which it is sold on. Now, here's the thing. On the page, there are multiple versions of this desk in various colors. And the most popularly viewed picture of this desk is of a different color with a lighter wood grain that's more grayish. And people look at that and they get confused. Now, at the time of this review, that is still the case. However, if they were to scroll through the rest of the pictures, they would see that the black option, which this is the black option, is the one that they would be buying. And it is also a note on the Amazon page that says black. So when you look through all the pictures, if you're not, looking at the detail and the descriptions and it says, hey, you're looking at the black one, then yes, that mistake would be totally on the user, because the seller did disclose which color it is in particular that you would be getting. However, I would suggest to the sellers that in this particular listing, because there's no option to select the other color variants anyway, to just simply remove the other color options that you can get from that listing and just put the one or two pictures of the black desk that you'd be getting anyway as the only two pictures that you would be able to view in the first place, and that'll cut down on a lot of the confusion. So ultimately, yes, if you bought it looking at the first two pictures and thought that's what you'd be getting, that is the consumer's error, but that error is easy to make because of the seller's decision to post pictures of other variants of the same product, which don't have options to select in that listing anyway. Moving on with the aesthetic discussion, let's talk about the colors in more detail, being this is the black option. You get the metal, which is a flat black for the most part. It's not glossy. And all the accent pieces and connections like the nuts and bolts are all a chrome finish. The feet have a chrome finish. And the wood on top is black. Now, the wood is particle board. It's an eco-friendly particle board according to the Amazon seller. I'm going to try and... there we go. I got a nice zoom on it so you can kind of gather what it looks like. Now, because it's particle board, I have a strong suspicion that this is not genuinely painted. It's probably just a veneer finish that goes over the top. So at some point, you may experience appealing, but then again, maybe not. It all really depends on how you use it. You can protect your desk with obvious things, like if you have a mouse for a computer, use a mouse pad. Otherwise, every time you use the mouse, the friction will eventually wear down onto the desk. I've done that with many desks. I just don't like mouse pads, but that's something to think about. If you have a drink with you, use a coaster. Those are pretty standard things that you would do to ensure that you don't, make the aesthetic design of the desk fade or get diminished or degraded in any way. So that's really up to the consumer to protect their investment by doing what would be considered pretty typical, obvious, and standard things. So let's talk about the functionality of the desk. Obviously, whatever you get the desk for, that is totally up to you. However, the desk is marketed on Amazon as a product in which you would use your computer with. And quite frankly, that's what a lot of people who get L desks usually do, is they use their computer with it. So what I've done is I've got my laptop and a keyboard and a mouse to see if everything fit properly. And I'm glad to say that it can easily accommodate all these things without the need of some sort of drawer to come out from underneath. I really don't like those drawers, but hey, that's a personal thing. I'm glad to see that, if I were to have a desktop, I could always just put it in the space over here. And because this is a chamfered design, we got a hole that we can route wires through, in which I've done for my one laptop. But if you got a desktop, you can route a ton of different wires coming up from the back there. And, this will easily accommodate whatever monitor you decide to use, plus your keyboard and mouse. So I don't think there's going to be any problems there. Now, as far as stability goes, rattling-wise, if you shake one part of it, the entire desk moves as a whole, which is good. So the parts are not isolated or loose. So that's a good thing. So, you can really bang on the desk here, but because it's got two beams of metal going across the entirety of the desk in each direction where the wood sits, and because the wood is screwed into those metal beams in 6 positions, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then same on this end too, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The wood is firmly secured into the metal, so you can be really rough on this desk, and the desk is not going to have a problem with it. It should hold it. It's a pretty sturdy construction. That's one of the nice things about metal, is once it's all put together and in place, it's usually pretty steady. Now, like I was saying before, the metal is thin, but once it's all in its proper position, usually up against the wall, there's not much room for it to flex, which helps with the overall design. And, realistically, I can't imagine this desk falling apart for any particular reason. The quality of the parts is sufficient for your everyday use, and if you're the type to get frustrated and bang on your desk once in a while, we've all done it, I don't think you're going to have a problem. It's not, just all cheap particle board. Some desks are all made of this cheap particle board, and that with that, it's easy to destroy, but the metal is a bit stronger, and in that respect, it's a bit more durable in that sense. So once it's set up and put in its permanent position, it's a sturdy desk. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. That's just how it is. So here is my conclusion about the desk. 1, the build quality is quite sturdy for what it is. Aesthetically speaking, I think it fits pretty well just about anywhere. Black tends to be pretty universally accepted in terms of, matching other color palettes. But then again, that's totally up for you to decide. There are other color options, so keep that in mind. Engineering-wise, they could have done better. Those weird connections in the metal that require a hammer to really bang in, I think, could have been solved with a different design that's more simplistic. And I think that the little ridge right here is something that they could have worked out when they engineered the desk. so that it wasn't a problem. You know, it's not a deal breaker, but for over $100, I wish that would be something that they would have seen and fixed before they started producing and sending these out to people. So overall, you know, the desk, it's relatively spacious for what you get. The overall design's pretty good. And as a whole, I think it's sufficient. I think for the money, it's all right. But ultimately, that's for you to decide. So I hope this review was helpful in if you were looking at this desk and deciding if it's something that you want to get. And if it is, please give me a thumbs up. You know, please rate, you know, subscribe. Check out my other videos I got on my channel. I got plenty of them. And as always, I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.